The Mimic is not what you think it is. The newest installment to the FNaF franchise released a couple of weeks ago, and I've figured out the entire truth behind the game. This is The Secret of the Mimic Explained. Edwin's dad, or otherwise known as Edwin Sr., owned a successful business called Murray's Costumes, where they would hire out many costumes or festival-related items. However, Edwin Sr. died early, leaving Murray's costume manor in Edwin's hands. Business was slow for Edwin as soon as it was in his hands. Workers began to leave for other places due to them not being able to keep up with what Edwin wanted done. Edwin was churning out new items all the time to find something that could set Murray's costumes off again. Eventually, he made the Cleanovac, an invention that paid off. It started to go even better for Edwin as he met an employee called Fiona. They ended up creating a family, and their child, David. This lasted for many long years until some point in 1970, when the big, well-known event, Fall Fest, was around the corner. Fiona said in one of the tapes that she was helping out the Murray's Costume Manor employees to set up for the event. However, tragically, Fiona ended up losing her life in a fire that occurred for unknown reasons. This ruined Edwin. He even said that she shouldn't have been there, and why did she even go? After the grief, in one of the tapes, he apparently was able to hear Fiona talking from the basement. He said he could swear it was her. In one of the tapes within the game, Edwin said for some reason he could hear her at the frequency of 4625. A very specific number. I don't see why Steelwool would want us to know this, unless it was linked to something else. So I'm gonna keep digging for that one. But anyway, he decided he could use one of his new robots to replicate Fiona, the Mimic. This robot was created to mimic the persona of any costume and wear it, perfect to rid himself of the grief. This meant Edwin could get work done whilst the new Fiona, or M1, as it was known, babysitted David. They lasted quite a while as a family like this, until David's birthday. Luckily for Edwin, he had M1, and she told him to do exactly the same as he did for her. Eventually, she ended up saying that she could go in the cradle through messages we see when collecting the mail within game. This would be for the duration of whilst Edwin worked off of M1's body for M2's. If you collect the mail throughout the game, these messages appear on the helper system, providing the info. Fiona's spirit was eventually put into the cradle, or what we know as Nexus. However, Edwin became so obsessed with this and spent weeks on it on end with no success. In one of the voice tapes, he says,
"Every copy has failed. I don't even know why it worked the first time, but it did."
This was probably due to David's spirit possessing the Tiger suit, who we confront in-game. It would make a lot of sense because Tiger in-game zooms around and disappears almost like a ghost, almost like Golden Freddy. The Crying Child possessed Golden Freddy because of his Fredbear plush. David possesses Tiger because of his Tiger plush. But back to the point, Edwin's time was completely consumed by this and the Fazbear project, leading to the downfall of Murray's Costume Manor. Whilst all of the Mimic shenanigans had been taking place, Edwin was also deeply devoted on focusing on the project for Fazbear Entertainment. In-game, if you go underground in Murray's Costume Manor, you can find the R&D block, where a prototype of the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria lays. The whole layout from the first ever game back in 2014 is here, and the prototypes of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and the Springlock suits of Fredbear, Spring Bonnie, and Bubbles. You learned throughout the tapes that Fiona had designed the animatronics, and Fazbear Entertainment kept making changes last minute, costing money and time for Edwin. I believe this to be purposeful. Fazbear Entertainment wanted to remove all competition and gain the land of Murray's Costume Manor. William Afton even sends a message seen in-game to Edwin, saying that they'd like to take him as the lead engineer, and his land was practically theirs now. He even says, "It's fair considering how far behind you are." Finally, at one point, Edwin realized he'd gone too far to make M2 his son, so he lost his temper in it, telling it,
"You're not him. You're not! Stop sounding like him!"
This will have been where the Mimic adopted its violent behavior from. In an unknown experiment later on, we hear in one of the tapes in the broken part of Edwin's house that Edwin is severely injured in the background, calling for help from M2. This is where M2 ended up getting back at Edwin, talking in Edwin's voice. Whether this was intentional for M2 or just did it because of how it was programmed, I don't know. But that was the story before Arnold came in. When we play as Arnold, sent to retrieve the schematics for M2, we explore all of Murray's costume manor, and eventually end up in the R&D block, where the Fazbear project was being built. Of course, we know that Edwin had been a contractor for Fazbear Entertainment to have their new pizzeria designed. This was underground, as a prototype. The actual pizzeria wasn't going to be built here. I think a lot of people got mixed up with that. The whole thing was just a prototype. But back to the point, within this pizzeria we find the office, and if you manage to drain all the power from it, the doors open, and inside we find the Nexus. Now, this is Fiona, or M1, who had been temporarily stored in it, whilst Edwin worked on M2. But as Edwin died, Fiona was always going to be stuck in it. Now, Fiona had been the one mimicking Dispatch to get us to come and help get Edwin to fix M2. We end up in Edwin's house, but to no success, can't find Edwin, for clear reasons we know of. Then we have a whole mimic chase where we think he's after us, but what I'm about to say changes all of that. The reason M2 is actually after us is shown in the true ending. When we are pursued by M2 and crash, we see M2's real intention. All along, he was just after the data diver, not us. He wanted the schematics too. Now, why did he want them? Some people now think that there is a third mimic that Fiona and M2 built together to be the best version of them. And that's quite understandable, especially since the mimic in Ruin looks completely different to the one in Secret of the Mimic. However, I think I'm going to stick to the first basic one everyone thought of. M2 wanted to be fixed, so he did that, using scrap parts he could find. It does sound basic and like there's not a lot there, but it's all M2 and Fiona ever wanted. M2 wanted to be complete, not to rebuild another one. What would Fiona and M2's purpose be then? So that is my entire Secret of the Mimic theory. How Edwin's life played out, the Mimic's motive. Secret of the Mimic was an incredible game to play. I loved it, and it probably is up there in the top games. I can't wait to see what Steel Wool can do next for FNaF, and if there will even be a prequel to this game. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed my theory. I would love to see what you guys thought of the game, and as always, I hope to see you guys in my next video.